my goodness, am I okay? Venom: The Last Dance. I went and saw this movie maybe 2 days before it left theaters. Quick little side story. Our local theater used to be the Grand. It was the Grand for many years, and it's been recently bought out by Santikos. All of the Grand theaters were. And so it was only my second time going to the theater to see a movie since Santikos became the owner. You know, this movie had been out a while by the time I went to go see it, so I was the only person in this particular showing. And when I showed up, this theater had clearly not been cleaned. Like, there was just stuff everywhere. And so my opinion on Santikos is kind of up and down right now. The first time I was there, it was fine. You know, Santikos, the second time, it wasn't. It was dirty. There had clearly been no effort to, you know, tidy up. And then I've been to the theater once since then. So, you know, I don't know what to think, but Santikos, do better, be consistent. But that doesn't really have anything to do with the movie itself, so let's talk about that. I went into Venom: The Last Dance with moderately low expectations. I enjoyed the first 2 installments of the Venom franchise, I had a good time, but I think that the Sony Spider-Verse as a whole has not been very exciting, with other installments like Morbius, which I think was overhated, but still not very good, and Madam Web, which was a complete train wreck from start to finish. Venom: The Last Dance didn't really live up to what you'd expect from the ending of a trilogy. I think the overall plot was fine, and spoiler alert if you haven't seen the movie, but I think the main issue I have with the plot is the lackluster use of the side characters. I think that one of my biggest critiques of Morbius was the lack of development for some of its side characters and even the main villain and other characters. I think that that lack of development really hinders the ability to properly show their motivation or to get you to have any sort of real meaningful connection with a character. Venom: The Last Dance suffers from some of these same issues with characters like Dr. Payne and Sadie. A significant amount of the runtime was dedicated to following their story and their side of the plot, and ultimately I still think they're underdeveloped characters. Dr. Payne was given a brief flashback scene with her brother dying, and that was supposed to indicate to the audience the character's motivation going forward. But I'm sorry, a brief flashback of your brother dying when he loved space and science is not enough for me to understand this other character. It's just not. Even if they were working with a limited runtime and that's why they went the route that they did, I still think they messed up. In my opinion, scrap the flashback scene. It didn't really add much to the movie. Dedicate those few minutes or whatever to more scenes in the present introducing this character and explaining her motivation. Because I think that the flashback just doesn't really serve the story in any way. It's meant to set up this character, and that's really it. It doesn't set up any story, and the character doesn't really feel set up when it's all said and done anyway, so, you know, I would have liked if they went a different route. Although I think Dr. Payne is an underdeveloped character, Sadie is even more of an enigma. She's a character that's just in the movie, without any real depth or anything like that. All that we really know about her is that she has a Christmas tree pendant on her jacket, that she saves Eddie and Venom, and that she unleashes the symbiotes. Oh, and she's scared. That's one thing about her too, I guess, that she's scared. But if you've seen the movie, you kind of know what I'm talking about, I hope. She's just kind of there and does things without the movie really giving her depth, without explaining her actions in any way. You know, the dialogue that she's given doesn't really explain her actions very well, if it does at all. You know what I mean. She's just kind of almost a plot device more than a real character. I guess as the audience, you can infer that her being afraid leads her to save Eddie and Venom and to unleash the symbiotes, but that's never really explicitly stated. Not that it needs to be like said, I'm afraid, I'm gonna do this. But you know, you shouldn't have to infer to this degree something about a side character in a superhero movie. You know, I shouldn't have to think super hard about Venom: The Last Dance. And not to mention, inferring motivations of a character is usually for characters that are jaded and hard to read. Sadie's just not written very well. That's really all there is to it. And not to mention, for me anyway, it doesn't make sense that a scientist studying alien life suddenly becomes so afraid that she unleashes it on the world. Those two things don't necessarily go together. Now, aside from the lackluster development of the side characters, I think that Venom: The Last Dance suffers from something that Madam Web suffers from. I don't think that the side characters are super likable when it's all said and done. For me at least, I didn't like them very much. Although General Strickland is one of the more developed side characters in the movie, one whose motivations make total sense, I didn't super love his character when it was all said and done. He was just kind of okay. And I like Dr. Payne even less. There's a point in the movie when General Strickland's strike team gets killed, and he's rightfully pissed and upset, and then Dr. Payne asks him if he can take some samples of the dead bodies. And in my opinion, if you're going to underdevelop a character like Dr. Payne, you can't make them unlikable in their screen time, you know? The few real character moments that you have for this character can't be negative if we're supposed to support this character and see them in a positive light. But now that I'm done with my side character rant, let's get back to the main plot. I think that the main story was okay, but it's nothing we haven't seen before. I think, honestly, I was the least invested out of the 3 Venom films. I think this story in the 3rd movie appealed to me the least. Some of the plot points did feel a little weird to me and a bit random, like seeing Miss Chen at the casino and then dancing with her in her room. That part felt kind of like it didn't belong, like it was just put in there. It felt a bit weird and out of place. And honestly, I wasn't super invested in most of the story up until the final act. The final act hooked me, but I think it hooked me because it was cool. I think it hooked me because it was visually pleasing, because it was cool to see all the symbiotes fighting and everything, rather than it hooking me because the story hooked me. I don't know what happened, but for me, this is the weakest story of the 3. I think that Venom: The Last Dance does have some bright spots. The special effects are great, and they have been really good throughout the whole Venom trilogy. But this one does have some things that we've never seen before, like Venom merging with different animals and a symbiote army fighting the xenophages. I think those things all looked really good, and the movie as a whole looked good. It's just, you know, I think that the story was probably the biggest part that needed to be done right and wasn't. I wasn't really blown away by any acting performances in this film, but what I will say is that I think the cast did a great job with what they were given. I think they did a great job with what I think was a so-so script. Tom Hardy does a great job in this movie as always, and it's doubly impressive because of course he plays Eddie Brock and Venom. But I think it's for the best that it's the end of the line for these characters for the time being. I don't know if it's just me, but in Venom: The Last Dance, the Eddie Brock-Venom dynamic loses a little bit of its charm. I appreciated what they did in Let There Be Carnage, giving these characters some space from one another for a time and allowing their relationship, if you want to call it that, to, you know, develop, to move forward, to change for the better. And it feels like in The Last Dance, we've kind of just gone back to the way things were. Like, I don't know. I don't know what I would have liked, but I feel like we're just doing the same old at this point, so it's probably for the best that we're done for now. I think what I would have liked, honestly, is if Venom and Eddie Brock were on the same page a little bit more. In Venom 1, they were still getting used to each other, they were, you know, newly in a symbiotic relationship, and they were butting heads because, you know, it's a human being who didn't know alien life existed up until now, and an alien. And in Let There Be Carnage, you know, they have some space from one another because they're butting heads a lot. They're not of the same mind whatsoever. And then they kind of, you know, develop, you know, they kind of, you know, figure themselves out in a way without each other. And then they come together and they seem to be, you know, kind of like that in the second half of that movie. And then now we're kind of just butting heads a little bit throughout this movie again. Not necessarily like, you know, them's fighting words type of button heads, but, you know, neither of them are on the same page with one another throughout the movie again. You know, there are times when they are, but for the most part, it's the same as it's always been. And I would have liked, I think, in the 3rd movie, with them having been together for so long and experienced so much together, I would have liked for them to kind of, you know, be like this. You know, I'm thinking this, and I'm also thinking this. You know what I'm saying? And I didn't hate what they did with Eddie and with Venom in this movie. I just felt like it was a little bit repetitive, and that's all. And I want to also state and clarify that it's not Tom Hardy's fault at all. I don't blame him for that whatsoever. It's just something I wanted to mention, and this felt like a good time. One of the standouts to me was Rhys Ifans, who played Martin. He did a good enough job that I didn't even realize that it was him until the end of the movie. Sony must really love him, because this is now the second character he's played in a Spider-Man related movie. The last person I'll mention is Chiwetel Ejiofor, who plays General Strickland. It's unfortunate that Mordo was essentially written out of the MCU, so it's just nice to see him in Venom. It's nice to see him in another superhero property after his character that was supposed to be, bigger than it was, just, fizzled out. Oh, never mind, I have one more person to mention. Andy Serkis. Andy Serkis has been in a lot, and he's done a lot. But just to keep it in the Venom, universe, he directed the last movie, Venom: Let There Be Carnage. And apparently he plays Null in the few scenes that Null actually has. And I think that was a great choice. I think he did a great job with what little he actually had to do. But I think it was a great casting choice because Andy Serkis is obviously a very accomplished voice actor and mocap actor. And I don't know if there was actually any mocap for Null, but either way, it's a great choice. He's a great voice actor. Going into the movie, I honestly thought that Null was going to be played by Norman Reedus. But I guess those were just rumors and that wasn't ever actually true. Overall, I think that Venom: The Last Dance is a decent movie, by no means terrible, but I think it fails to live up to its predecessors. I think it has some fun times and some cool effects, but ultimately I don't think it's super memorable. I would still encourage you to check out the movie to form your own opinion, because I would always encourage you to form your own opinion on movies. That's just my opinion. But that's all I've got to say about Venom: The Last Dance. What did you think of this movie? Was there anything that I said that you agreed with, disagreed with? Let me know in the comments. If you haven't seen this movie, go check it out and then come back here and then let me know. But if you want to help me out here on YouTube, liking this video, commenting on this video, subscribing to the channel, checking out some of my other videos. I've done some of the other Sony Spider-Verse things. I've done Morbius, I've done Madam Web. Go check those videos out. But until next time, bye.